well over 5 billion pounds of pesticides are applied each year around the world, and agriculture is a major player in pesticide usage. Whether it's glyphosate, neonicotinoids, 2,4-D, or dicamba, many of these pesticides manifest many different negative outcomes in the environment, the ecology, and human health. As public awareness of pesticides and their potential dangers continues to spread, both growers and consumers are looking to shift towards agricultural practices that do not rely on a lot of these agrochemicals. However, this alternative path is not necessarily quite as straightforward and simple as what many might like to believe it is. A farmer or gardener has to contend with weather, pests, disease, and weeds. Chemical pesticides have been around for a little while, and they've been around for a pretty valid reason, right? They keep pests away, or they kill pests. So when we stop using these chemicals, we have to learn a different way to farm. We have to be able to incorporate and work with the environment and the ecology so that we can have a productive and profitable farm or garden, right? So the study and practice of farming with ecology or regenerative agriculture and all these different names, sustainable agriculture, are continuing to develop and evolve as we continue to move forward. But where do we start? How do we learn to incorporate these different practices? And what are these different practices that we need to incorporate in order to be successful? How do we farm with nature, with ecology, working with our crops and some of these beneficial weeds and beneficial insects so that we can either build and or maintain a healthy balance on the landscape and produce a productive yield each year? I recently read a book this past winter called The Ecological Farm by Helen Atthowe, and this book absolutely blew me away. There was so much information on different insects, both the pests and the beneficial pollinators and predator insects, as well as a bunch of different weeds that growers may have to contend with, but how some of these weeds can actually be beneficial if we are able to work with them appropriately, right? This book doesn't just talk about plants and different pest insects or beneficial insects and different types of weeds or cover crops, but it talks about, more importantly, their relationships to each other and understanding that flow and balance between all of those entities, the crops, the weeds, the beneficial insects, the pest insects, the diseases, and even certain nutrients like nitrogen or carbon or calcium. And so this book weaves together the relationships of, for example, a crop that might be susceptible to a certain pest. However, there might be a beneficial insect that can keep that pest insect in control, right? And there might be a certain wild plant or native plant that might attract that beneficial insect into the area so they can have a food source and or a home, so they can be there in the area so they can go after the pest insect. And so understanding all the relationships that this book weaves together, we can then understand how to design our gardens, farms, or growing systems in ways that take these ecological relationships into account. And this is how we would wean ourselves off any chemical dependencies that we would otherwise be dependent upon. And that's why this book is so important. It puts all those relationships, all those patterns down on paper so we can read them, understand them, and then incorporate them into our growing systems, right? So we can be a lot more educated, a lot more aware of how these ecological systems function and how even such small disturbances sometimes can have huge impacts on the entire system or the entire ecosystem. This book teaches us how to maintain a balance, how to create a balance first if there's an imbalance, right? But then how to maintain that balance moving forward, right? This book also teaches us how we can learn to begin to grow more of our own fertilizers, right? On our own land through the harvesting of different living mulches, right? Like cover crops or different combinations. so we can have a more balanced nutrient ratio that is in line with what our crops need, with what our soil needs. Guys, I cannot recommend this book enough. While there is so much to learn and uncover in ecological farming or regenerative agriculture, science has only begun to scrape the surface on what is possible with this alternative approach to agriculture. But this book ties in a lot of different studies, both ones that she has done on her own farms or ones that she has researched that other scientists or universities have done. And so this book, to date, of what I have found, is the most comprehensive, well-rounded guide to this alternative form of farming. When I was reading this book, there were multiple points that different light bulb moments went off, right, where I suddenly made a connection. So if you want to learn more about ecological farming, farming with nature rather than against it, and not being nearly so dependent on chemical or industrial inputs, this book is absolutely a must-have. So the link to this book is down in the description. I highly recommend you check it out. And with that, thank you so much for checking out this video. I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.